All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And on that note, I'm going to close out the room, but I wanted to say a few things before I do. Uh, you know, a lot's been said about Elvis, as a singer and how great he was as a singer. But one of Elvis's greatest attributes was the fact about his generosity. And you mentioned the Arizona, and that's true. I was lucky enough to go to the Arizona in Hawaii, out there at Pearl Harbor, and it had been sunk, of course, at the time. And one of the things that was great is Elvis did a show at the Pearl Harbor in 1961. But Elvis raised a lot of money at the time. And the reason he went there to raise the money and to do the concert was to raise money for the Pearl Harbor Memorial for the Arizona, which raised, I believe, Elvis, with his own money and the money he raised at the Arizona Memorial Concert, he raised over $60,000. They built the memorial that's out there today. And I was lucky enough to be out there at a point where, I don't know, it was some 20 some years ago at this point. And there were some of the World War II veterans that were actually in Arizona when it was sunk. And it was kind of surreal to be there to see, because when you look down over the memorial into the water, you can still see the top of the boat. You can see it, and there's still oil trickling to the surface. And they said at the time, this was 20 some years ago, they said at the time that it would probably continue for about another 50 years. And you would see the oil coming up to the surface. And I mean, to be there, though, with the actual people that were on the boat at the time when it happened, it was extremely cool, and it was an honor to be there with them. I was lucky at the time. It was just timing. I was lucky to be there when they were there and everything else. And yes, there is a plaque there, Andy, on the memorial, which I actually seen and I touched, of course, because it's about Elvis. And that goes down to say what I've always said about Elvis Presley, and that's my point, is he was never about making it public. You said, you made a good point there. Nobody really knows that he did that. I mean, it's not out there really. I mean, a few people know it, but it's not something that is public. They don't really make it that point. It's not, the Presleys don't really care to make it public. I mean, that's what Elvis was all about, just doing what's right. And it was right. It was the right thing to do, and that's why he did it. And that's the whole point about Elvis Presley, his generosity. Elvis was about helping others first and foremost, and not wanting to get credit for it. I mean, he don't get credit for a lot of the things he's actually done. He did it because he wanted to. He did it out of the kindness of his heart. That's why Elvis is such a great person. Not just his music, but him himself. Who he really was is what made him great. Elvis didn't want to get prestige from doing anything. He didn't want to have people hand him, an honor like, oh, Elvis did this. That's the kicker of it all. Nobody has any clue that Elvis did that for the Arizona Memorial. They really don't. Unless people say something, they really don't know. They don't know what he does each and every day. St. Jude's is a good point you brought up. Danny Thomas and Marlo Thomas now have done a wonderful job with that charity. And I will say, and I have said, that is the finest charity on the face of the planet. Almost every single dime you give to St. Jude's goes to helping the families and the people, the children, I should say the children, who have cancer. Yes, he did. That's absolutely 100% true. And that's the key with St. Jude's. It absolutely was, Scott. See, you know what you're talking about. He did. He bought FDR's yacht, and he did donate that to St. Jude's. to raise money for the charity. And like I say, Danny Thomas, God love him, God rest his soul, started St. Jude's, and Marlo Thomas has done a wonderful job to continue that, and the family, and everybody else. And it's in Memphis, and it's, like I say, if your child has cancer, you don't pay a dime. You don't pay nothing. You absolutely pay nothing. You go there, they take care of you. You have a hard enough time. Think about it. You have a hard enough time dealing with the fact that your child has cancer. The last thing you need to do is worry about bills coming in. Not that, it's crazy. Why would you worry about that? But the honest truth is, it costs millions of dollars to take care of one person with cancer. In some cases, not always, but in some cases, and that's true too. There's so many things. We could go on for hours and hours and hours about the stuff that Elvis has done, and Elvis continues to do. Think about it. The Presley House. There is, like I said, there is more than 20 different charities that Elvis gives to each and every year, his estate and himself, and continues to do so, and will continue to do so until Elvis Presley Enterprises is no more, which will be never, because it will go on forever. Always remember that, Elvis Presley was probably one of the greatest things about Elvis wasn't just his music. It wasn't just his music. It truly, truly was, and you're right, Scott, it truly was his generosity. I'm going to tell a little story. I've said it before, but the people in the room, I don't know who was in the room the last time I told it. See, a lot of people have this idea that Elvis Presley was extremely rich, and therefore, who cares? He gave away money. He had money. Money grew on trees for Elvis, right? If he didn't have money, he'd make a movie. If he didn't have money, he'd, go do a concert tour. He didn't have money, he'd sing a couple records, whatever. But here's the kicker. Guys, we all know that Elvis Presley grew up in Mississippi, in Tupelo, Mississippi. And he was flat broke. They were so poor. Gladys, Vernon, and Elvis. And after, Jesse was stillborn, so Elvis was a single child. And Vernon and Gladys literally, no offense, but didn't have a pot to piss in. I really didn't. They were broke. The house that they lived in was a shotgun shack that was built by Jesse, Elvis's grandfather, and Vernon, with borrowed money, okay? And Vernon, had to pay that money back, but that was the way they got a house, and it was nothing special. It's no big deal. That house was just basically, a shotgun shack is nothing more than a one-room house, basically, where if you shot a gun through the front door, it would go through the back door. That's why it's called a shotgun shack. And Tupelo, Mississippi at the time was no money. We're talking the ghetto, basically. Absolutely did. Vernon wrote a bad check for food, and he did have to serve some time in the penitentiary or the prison for that. And I believe it was in the late 30s, actually, truth be told, yes. Well, here's a story about Elvis Presley and his generosity. I think this will put it into perspective. Elvis had no money. His mom and dad had no money. Everything that Gladys and Vernon gave to Elvis was something that they took their time and they saved and they saved. And believe me, Gladys had a heart of gold. And Vernon was a great guy. Vernon did every possible thing he could do to support his family. And Gladys loved her son more than you know. And I know that sounds silly to say because we all know how much Elvis and Gladys loved each other. But believe me, she would have took a shotgun to the face for Elvis and vice versa. Truth be told. And that's the honest truth, and that's the way it was. And it needs to be said 100% that they had nothing, okay? So here's Elvis Presley, young Elvis, living in Mississippi. I don't know, at the time of this story, he's like 7, 8, 9 years old. Okay, they didn't move away from Mississippi and Tupelo until Elvis was, in 1948 when he was about 13 years old. Okay, that's when they moved to Memphis. So Elvis at the time of this story was like 7 or 8 years old. One of the times of this main story here. Elvis had been given a couple of toys for his birthday, and had a couple of toys from his Christmas. And, he'd go out like any kid, and he would play with those toys in the neighborhood, and there were other kids around. And there was this one kid that came up to Elvis at one time, and this happened a few times. This wasn't one time. This was something that happened a few times. And he was playing with his truck in the dirt, moving his truck around. And the kid said, "Man, that is a great toy. I don't have no truck like that, but my mommy and daddy can't afford it." And Elvis said, breaks me up thinking about it. Elvis said, "Well, you got the truck now, kid. It's yours. I want you to have it." And he gave the truck to the kid, because Elvis liked to see people happy. And of course, the kid ran home. He was happy, after he got done playing with Elvis. He had the truck. And Elvis would refuse to take the toys back. He wouldn't take them back. And then he would tell his mom, "Hey, Mama, I gave my truck away to the kid down the street." And Gladys would, "You can't do that. You can't give away your stuff. We don't have a lot of money, son. You can't give away your stuff." He said, "But Mama, he was happy. I want to see him happy." And what could she do? Here you got a kid with a heart of gold. You don't want to ruin that. So this is where Gladys stepped in. She didn't. She didn't stop that in him. She taught him that, it's not about what you have that makes life good. It's not about your possessions that makes life good. It's not about everything that you gain that makes life good. It's about what you. See, you change the world. It's what you do for other people that makes the world good. That's what she taught Elvis. And that's why when Elvis did get all the riches, and he did get all the wealth, and he did get everything that he ever wanted. And see, Elvis's only goal in getting that money and getting the house and the cars and all that wealth, the only reason he fought to get that was so he could give it to his mom and his dad. Honestly, he bought Graceland not for himself. He bought Graceland for his mama and his dad. He bought Graceland so they could have a castle to live in. Because he said one day, I'm going to get you a mansion, Mama. I promise you I'll get you a mansion. If it's the last thing I do, I'll get you a mansion. And that's why he bought Graceland, because to him, that was the epitome of a mansion. That was the epitome of a house. And I think if any of you have been there, you realize why he's right. The outside of that is just awesome. And see, here's the kicker. Here's how awesome Gladys was, how great Gladys was. When she moved into Graceland, she would have much rather been down in the ranch, down the street, on Audubon Drive, than to be in Graceland. To her, it wasn't about the big house, And Elvis wanted so bad just to give her the mansion and give her the cars, bought her a pink Cadillac, which she never drove, bought the mansion for her and her dad and his dad, and gave them everything they could ever want. Anything they ever wanted, he would give them. I mean, anybody. We know that. Elvis bought people houses. He bought them cars. He had a temper. Elvis had a temper, trust me. And he'd get mad and he'd fire people. And you're fired. Get out of here, Red. Fire that guy. I tell you right now, fire him. And then, within seconds, he would get he'd be like, "Oh man, what did I just do, man? Red, I'm sorry, man. Get him back. I'll buy him a Cadillac. Just get him back." I mean, you've seen the story. It's true. He loved people around him. He loved to be around people. He loved their energy. He just loved to make people happy. Let me see here. I'll read on an article. Joe Esposito said, Elvis to a stack of $100 bills. Oh, that's right. Morgan Freeman. Yeah, totally true. there's when it comes down to generosity, there's nobody ever, you know, no, nobody ever that's been more generous than Elvis. Uh, I mean, to the point where he almost bankrupted himself out. I don't know how many times. uh, and actually, he didn't care. I mean, he really didn't care. Yeah, yeah. Are you talking about when he was at the concert and he stopped the show and yep, stopped the show just to go up to the little blind girl and make her special for that moment? Yep, absolutely. He sure did. Stopped the show. Just stopped it. Gave her like, you know, 10 minutes. It was all about her. It wasn't about Elvis Presley no more. It was about the little blind girl, in front of him. That's what it was about. That's the epitome of Elvis Presley, the greatest entertainer that ever lived, the one and the only. I think I'm going to close it out like that, guys. Every one of you in this room know that Elvis Presley wasn't just about the music. He wasn't just about religion. He wasn't just about what you see in a book. Elvis Presley was probably his best attribute. Wasn't just his music. It probably was his personality, his person. It was Elvis Presley himself. It was who he was. Elvis truly was a gift from God. Truly. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was truly a gift from God. Not just his music, but him himself, the person he was. He absolutely was a gift from God.